Hey listeners, this is Peter, and welcome to another History Shorts weekend show. A soon-to-be weekly Patreon exclusive, but for now, just a preview. Think of this as a less scripted, lighter-toned variety show, which features more storytelling, commentary, and clips from the Conversation series Vault, but also previews of episodes and interviews to come. On this episode, we talk about the unofficial start of the 1950s civil rights movement, the history of the weekend as we know it, and how a small fluctuation in economic reports might one day spark chapters about broader economic changes. We also get to hear an excerpt from an interview with Pulitzer Prize winning historian Ed Larson about his newest book, and then analyze one of the most important books ever written about the study of history, E.H. Carr's What is History?
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941,
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
This week in history, November 23rd to 29th. In 1874, Winston Churchill is born. The future prime minister who would define World War II enters the world. Some of you may not know, but he was actually half American through his mother's side. In 1804, Napoleon crowns himself emperor, a coronation with attitude where he grabbed the crown from the Pope and then placed it on his own head. Napoleon did not need anyone to give him authority. He took it himself. In 1933, Prohibition ended with the 21st Amendment, and America got to legally drink again. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus, a spark that became a movement leading to the Montgomery bus boycott, which also begins this week in 1955. Today's news for tomorrow's history books. This week, a number buried deep in a Reuters report may one day mark the beginning of a major chapter in American economic history. U.S. manufacturing activity fell to a 4-month low in November 2025, with the PMI dropping to 51.9. That sounds small, a couple of points on an index that most people don't even follow. But future historians might not see it that way. For 150 years, American manufacturing has been one of the country's most powerful engines. It built cities, shaped the middle class, and helped win 2 world wars. So when analysis points out that factories in America are facing shrinking demand, rising costs, and slowing production, it's not just an economic footnote, it could be the first page of a much larger transition. So future textbooks might describe this moment as the one where the US economy finally started shifting away from traditional industrial muscle towards something new. More automated, more globalized, maybe more service-driven. Moments like this never feel historic when you're living through them. But sometimes, the biggest turning points come quietly. Short story of the week. Let's talk about something we all treat as if it's part of the natural order of the universe. And that's the weekend. That glorious 48-hour escape hatch, the reward at the end of the week, the thing that keeps civilization from collapsing into madness. But here's the twist. For most of history, no one had a weekend. Not in ancient Rome, not in medieval Europe, not even in early America. The weekend is not ancient at all. It's a modern invention. Shockingly modern, actually. And the story of how it came to be is far more dramatic than you'd expect. Full of labor riots, immigrant pressure, and religious compromise. But also industrial accidents and one visionary automaker who changed the future of leisure. For the average American worker, you see, in 1800s, life was very simple. You worked a lot. 6 days a week, actually, 10 to 12 hours a day. Factory shifts started before dawn and ended after dark. Children worked, women worked, men worked. If you had a body, you basically had a job. And your day of rest was Sunday, but it wasn't really rest. It was church plus chores, and if you skipped either, someone had a problem with it. Whether it was your own priest or your spouse. Saturdays, however, well, those were full work days. People didn't talk about weekends because the concept didn't exist. But industrialization created a new tension. America's workforce was becoming more diverse, which led to the first major crack in the 6-day system. In the late 1800s, waves of Jewish immigrants arrived in the United States, bringing with them the practice of observing the Sabbath on Saturday, not on Sunday, which was more Christian and more accepted in the United States. This immediately created a crisis. If they honored their Sabbath and refused to work on Saturday, they'd be fired. So they lived in an impossible loop, one that exposed a harsh truth. America's work week wasn't built for a pluralistic society. And so Jewish laborers became some of the earliest and strongest advocates for a 2-day rest period. Their push set off what became known as the Saturday half-holiday movement. Businesses, sensing unrest, began allowing workers, slowly and reluctantly, to leave early on Saturdays. This wasn't generosity, it was actually self-preservation. But then employers saw something unexpected. Workers who put a half day on Saturday were more productive on Monday. It turns out that a little rest goes a long way. But the labor movement saw something else entirely. They saw an opening. By the early 1900s, American workers were exhausted and angry. Mines, mills, coal plants, and textile factories were dangerous and underpaid. Accidents were common. Families rarely saw each other. The labor movement, already energized by the fight for the 8-hour day, adopted a new rallying cry. We want our Saturdays. Strikes erupted across the country. Workers marched for a 40-hour work week. Unions grew stronger. The idea wasn't leisure, it was dignity. Time to be human, time to rest, time to breathe. And they knew something profound. If you want a humane society, you have to give people the time to be human. That meant 2 days off, not one. Still, most companies resisted, until one man forced their hand. In 1926, Henry Ford made a decision that stunned the business world. He shut down his factories on Saturday and Sunday. No work, no shifts, no exceptions. A full 2-day weekend. And he kept everyone's pay exactly the same. Why? Part philanthropy, you might say, but part brilliance. You see, Ford realized something other corporate leaders just missed. Leisure wasn't about lost productivity. It was future profit. If Americans had weekends, they would then take weekend drives. If they took weekend drives, they'd buy cars. If they bought cars, the entire American consumption engine would explode with possibility. Because, they would go places and spend money. And to no surprise, that's exactly what happened. Once Ford made the switch, other companies panicked. Give workers weekends, newspapers warned, or they'll just go work for Ford. Within a decade, the weekend spread across the nation. And in 1940, the United States government codified it, the Fair Labor Standards Act. It's the one that established the 40-hour work week. The weekend was officially born. By the 1950s, Saturdays belonged to the movies, sports, and road trips. Sundays belonged to family, quiet, and preparation for the week ahead. The weekend shaped American leisure, American consumerism, American family life, the rise of youth culture even, because, teenagers were bored, the growth of suburban communities. It gave birth to the idea of free time, something that previous generations didn't even have a word for. And it solidified the simple truth. Human beings are not machines, and we never should be treated like them. So the next time someone says, ugh, Monday again, remember, Monday only exists because someone fought, and in some cases of union uprisings, died for Saturday. So just take it and enjoy your 2 days off. Historian Spotlight. Here's a snippet from my forthcoming conversation with Pulitzer Prize winning historian Edward J. Larson about his latest book, Declaring Independence: Why 1776 Matters, available next Friday on the Conversation series. Make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss the entire episode. The subtitle of the book is awesome. Why 1776 Matters. In your view, what is the single most misunderstood or maybe overlooked way in which 1776 continues to matter today?
I don't know if it's overlooked, but it's the ideas. The ideas that an authoritarian king could never be a foundation of individual liberty. The idea that the people should rule. The North Carolina, and you could do this with all the states, but North Carolina Constitution begins, written in 1776, begins, where before, of course, sovereignty lied in the king, begins with the affirmation that the people are sovereign. And that idea that the people are sovereign and the people reign and they rule through their elected representatives, that idea was electric. And that's the idea that's spread throughout the world. And was, as Adams would explain in his Thoughts in Government, that the goal of government, borrowing, of course, on other ideas that came out of people like John Locke and Rousseau, that the goal of government is to protect and promote the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of the people.
For the good of the order. For today's reflection, I want to draw on one of the most important books ever written about the study of the past, E.H. Carr's What is History? First published in 1961, it's not a book of dates or battles, it's actually a book about how we think about history. And there's one line from Carr that I think is worth carrying into our week. History means interpretation. End quote. Carr argued that history isn't just a collection of facts scattered across time. It's actually a conversation between the past and the present. Facts don't speak for themselves. They have to be selected, arranged, and understood by historians who live in their own moment, with their own questions and their own worldview. Now, at first, that idea can feel a little unsettling. Does it mean that history is subjective? Does it mean that we can't trust the past at all? Carr didn't think so. What he meant was that history is not dead, it's alive, and every generation returns to the past with new eyes. And that's why the same event, a war, a revolution, a presidency, or a movement, gets interpreted differently as society changes. As new evidence emerges, as new voices get included, and as the present shifts, our understanding of the past shifts with it. Carr believed that this wasn't a weakness, this was actually the strength of history, because history's job isn't to freeze the past in amber. Its job is to help us understand who we are right now. So when we study labor movements, we're asking questions about fairness today. When we study empires, we're asking questions about power today. And when we study technology, we're asking questions about change today. History becomes a mirror, one that reflects both the long arc of the human story and the moment we're living in. As always, thank you so much for your support in making this little show such a mighty success. I cannot thank you enough. Have a restful Sunday and a great week. And don't forget to check out today's regularly scheduled episode. Talk to you all tomorrow.